Hey guys, this is Alan with a brand new episode of Devil May Play. This one's called Balls Deep.
I wasn't going to phrase it that way, but yes, indeed, we are going balls deep today. Balls deep in what, you ask? We are going balls deep into the idea of franchises, expanded universes, cinematic universes. There's so many of them now, and everybody wants to have one. And Lark and I were just having an interesting conversation on that, and I was trying to contain my opinion on this because I
Mm-hmm.
have a very strong opinion on it. But basically, this episode is going to be about cinematic universes or just expanded universes in general. Are they a good thing? Are they always a good thing? Should more people be trying to do them? How do you do them right? Is the very difficult question that a lot of people can't really answer. So, Lark, I'll start with you.
Start with me. Okay.
Yeah,
First of all, we were just discussing that Balls Deep is probably not that. It's not going to be a comfortable.
sounds very
Not very
uncomfortable when you
comfortable.
really envision it.
Um. So, all right, cinematic franchises. People, it's the hot thing in Hollywood right now. There's no doubt about it. And why do I sound like a fucking news announcer? It's the hot thing in Hollywood right now. Everyone's doing it. Basically, the idea has been around a lot longer than people might realize. Like, I am, for instance, I'm a huge James Bond fan, right? That film franchise has been going for over 50 years at this point. And I think it's a pretty successful film franchise, especially given the fact that every Bond film for the past, like, since Casino Royale has made more money than the previous one. Now, I'm not saying those films are perfect because they're clearly not, but it's an example of a successful film franchise. It's, and that's like the golden ticket for Hollywood. You have the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, and DC is trying to do their own cinematic universe. Oh,
And failing spectacularly.
oh, I just figured it out. That's so. First things first. Let's compare those two things. Okay, let's start with that. Let's start with the differences between the two, especially since Marvel's been around since I think 2008 was Iron Man, and they have built up a consistent cinematic universe with very few, if any, like inconsistencies. Fox, you should really take note here because Fox, just throwing this out there, Fox is notorious for fucking up continuity in their
Does anyone
universe.
really give a shit about Fox's quote unquote expanded
It's
universe
X
at
Men.
this
That's
point?
all it
Like,
is. It's X Men.
yeah, I mean, does anybody you I don't know if we I think you know my thoughts on the last X-Men movie. I was so incredibly
Mm.
disappointed in that movie. That movie pissed me the fuck off, especially because I never was really into the X-Men franchise, but I loved the one that came before that. What was it, Days of Future
Yeah,
Past?
yeah.
How do you go from that to that's
That's a
aside.
whole separate issue. Actually, don't you have a video on it?
I do have a video on
Okay,
that, yeah.
I'll link to that. We'll put that in the shout outs and just go look in the description. But let's talk about, like, broad view, what does Marvel do right and how have they been able to continue to make films, okay?
Well,
Broad
see,
view. They keep the continuity, right?
yeah,
And the good thing about that is some people don't like this, but the movies build on each other, right? Things that happen in one film very often have an effect on future films or sequels, right? So the good thing about that is, and this is something maybe people don't think about, but if you watch a film, say like Thor 2, okay, which was not a fan of, or Iron Man 3, or actually, sorry, Iron Man 2, there are events that happen in that are later referenced so that you have, like, at the very least, even if you don't like a film, you know that, okay, now I have a broader knowledge of the universe and of characters and of events, okay? So it's like, it's not a complete waste of time, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. And the way that they build, like, I don't know if everyone knows this, but for a while they had what was called a creative committee. And the creative committee for Marvel was making a lot of the decisions that I think weakened some of these films, specifically like Thor 2 and Iron Man 3. Originally, I don't know if you know this, but originally the villain was going to be a woman. It was I don't remember her name. Rebecca Hall, I think is the actress's name. But she was in the film for a very short period of time. But she was
which
supposed to be the
which
main
movie?
villain, Iron Man 3.
Okay.
So, but they backed out, and Ike Perlmutter, who's the Marvel CEO, doesn't. He's got some very antiquated views. Let's put it like that. So what I'm trying to say is they have films that build on each other, okay, and they have a consistent, I would say, a pretty consistent tone. Although from film to film, that tone can change. Captain America tends to be like the last two Captain America films have been like kind of spy thrillers, or at least thriller movies, right?
But it still feels like it's the same world.
Universe, sure, sure. Thor is very much a fantasy tone, and then Iron Man's kind of like, I guess, just action, like typical Hollywood action tone. Especially to me,
Good
like
example.
Iron Man 1 broke ground in a lot of different ways, but they really, the one thing that Marvel does better than anything else is they get their characters right. They pick the right actors and they make these characters, if not like believable, then grounded. Okay, Thor's probably the only one that I'm not like, oh great, it's Thor. Like, I mean, he's cool, but I'm never like that interested in him. Captain America, a lot of people give him shit, but I think he's one of the most interesting characters. Tony
Captain
Stark,
America is the best.
yeah,
I'm totally team. Even though I love Iron Man, he's one of my favorite superheroes. But the cinematic universe, Captain America. I mean, I talked about this on an episode about Superman a
yeah,
while ago, talking about I was comparing how they're both Boy Scouts, but at least in the cinematic universe, Captain America, they play with that
mm-hmm.
and they make a character out of it without sacrificing what he's supposed to be.
Sure,
Captain America is probably my favorite character in the cinematic universe.
right. So those are the things that I think they do the best. They have some weak villains. They have some problems with like predictable plots. I wish they would take some more chances, but they do those things extremely well. Like when you look at, there's no better example than Guardians of the Galaxy, right? You take these unknown characters the mainstream audiences do not know: Star-Lord, Groot, Rocket Raccoon, Gamora, Drax, right? Nobody really knew, like outside of comic book fans, nerds, whatever. No one really knew these characters. They aren't like Batman and Superman, and even Iron Man kind of came into mainstream consciousness. And they still knocked it out of the park. And Guardians, I think, is like my second favorite Marvel film because it has just such a tone of, like, the way that film starts out, right? You have a pretty typical science fiction action, start where he lands on an alien planet and he's got this cool, like, technology that can allow him to see holograms, and like you're watching people and you're like, okay, this is an ancient city. He walks in and like they just completely switch the tone. They subvert your expectations when he puts on the music and starts dancing around, and you're like, okay, I'm having fun with this film. Like, this film is not going to take itself too seriously. Conversely, DC. Conversely, Batman versus Superman. And I don't want to make this just a rant. I want to specifically, this is great because this is something that I finally crystallized recently. But you can go first. I'm going to let you go first.
Right. I just wanted to say, because I was telling Lark before we started this, that my thoughts on franchises and expanded universes in general are very simple and very strongly in one direction on my thoughts on that. But the same goes for what the Marvel Cinematic Universe does right and what the DC Universe does wrong. I have very strong opinions on that. And I think it's a lot more simple than a lot of people think. First off, as far as I'm concerned, the DC Universe is dead. Bury it. For one very simple reason. They fucked up too many times. Even if they make a good movie now, for that to exist in the same universe as Batman versus Superman exists in, ruins it. Because if you're going to have an expanded universe, then it's all in the same universe. I cannot reconcile the stupidity and madness, not even in terms of like from a movie making perspective, what actually happened in that movie with any good future DC movies. And what I think Marvel does right are two things that are very simple. First off is time and effort. Okay? Those are two separate things, but I'm lumping them together. Time and effort. The Marvel Cinematic Universe took years of pacing, slow build up within these movies that were, like fast paced, action packed, but there was always this stuff going on in the background. And we knew Avengers was coming, but nobody believed they could pull that shit off because it's a ridiculous idea. It's a crazy idea to think that they could have pulled this off, and they could have easily failed. But they put in the time, the resources. Whereas DC, just their actions feel like they're just trying to, like, especially in Batman versus Superman, they're just trying to go through the plot points as quickly as possible to get to Justice League.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if Marvel did that? If they ran through all of the most famous, most basic character defining moments from the comic books just so that they could get to the Avengers.
Yeah, true.
This took years for them, years both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. But also, and perhaps most importantly, regardless of whether the movie is lighthearted like Guardians of the Galaxy or a much darker but still, fun film like Civil War or Winter Soldier, which is probably my favorite Marvel movie, they're having fun, for Christ's sake. You can always feel like they're enjoying what they're doing. They are having fun. Even when they're talking about something serious, like again, in like Winter Soldier, when they're talking about, like privacy and, government overreach and all that stuff, they didn't get all up in their own ass about it. They didn't seem preachy about it. They were always having fun throughout it. And I never, not once, have gotten that sense from any of the DC movies. And I'm not biased against the DC movies. I'm the idiot who still can enjoy Man of Steel. And I know a lot of people in my community don't understand that, why I would enjoy that movie. And I can still go back and watch that movie and be like, knowing now what they're going to do with it diminishes how I feel about this movie. But at the time, just looking at the movie in isolation and me being optimistic, thinking, oh, this is just an amateur Superman. He doesn't know, he's still, rough and blah, 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 blah. And, oh, the destruction that Superman was causing wasn't as bad as everybody makes it out to be, blah, 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 blah. So I have defended DC when it's not popular. This isn't just me jumping on the bandwagon. But at this point, there's nothing left for us in the DC cinematic universe, quote unquote. There's nothing left.
Well, let's go back before I get to my final point with DC versus Marvel. Let's go back to what you were talking about, like the way that Marvel introduced their characters and the way that they built up to the Avengers. Because like you said, when that movie came out, it was an event just because we've been waiting years for it. Like they had set the groundwork since Iron Man 1. I think it was Iron Man, then Captain America. No, was it Iron Man, Thor, Captain America? I don't know. But you had those Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Thor 2, or Iron Man 2, and then the Avengers, right? I think that was the way. Oh, the Hulk was in there too. But they recast the Hulk, so that's kind of hard to say tied in.
It was kind of like a soft reboot.
Yeah, it was like a soft. But Mark Ruffalo did a better job anyways.
He did. I really respect them for doing that, though.
But they got you on board with the characters before they tried to do this huge mashup movie. And DC is doing the opposite, where they had putting the cart before the horse. What do I mean by that? If you watch Batman versus Superman, okay, you notice that they kept throwing in these plot elements like, oh, this is coming up soon, like Batman and that future that he saw, and then like the Flash coming to him. You're like, oh, Flashpoint, oh my god. Except it has nothing to do with the current fucking film at all. It was just them trying to tease like, oh, well, look at this, guys. We've got this. You remember this Flashpoint? You remember this is coming up? And you're like, okay, well, you're not excited. You're not selling me on these characters and the stories right now. Why the hell would I care about what you have planned for the future? Whereas Marvel, like, they set up their characters so well, and with each of their films, especially like you look at Iron Man 1. Iron Man 1 is our world, right? Captain America, sort of our world, little bit different than our world, because you have like, a Nazi that has a red skull, and there's some weird outer space stuff. Actually, now that I remember that, it has to be after Thor, because one of the Infinity Stones was used in it. But Thor expanded the scope of the Marvel Cinematic Universe by introducing this fantasy element, right? So now your scope just got bigger, okay? Then you have Guardians, scope gets even bigger. Then you have Doctor Strange, scope gets even bigger. So you're able to have a lot of choice for directors and writers to go wherever they want to go with it, and to introduce characters and have different, conflicts. So it's not always like Earth is in danger. With Thor, it could be a different planet's in danger. Or Doctor Strange, a different plane is in danger, or the whole plane of existence in danger. You get what I'm trying to say? Like they're giving themselves a lot of freedom to move around.
There's diversity, but you still get the sense that it's the same world. And you made a very good point, just very briefly, about the link between Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy. And I thought that was very genius what they did. They have basically two outer space themed franchises with Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
One, which is just hardcore science fantasy, and one that's more like science fiction, traditional science fiction. But you're reminded that this is happening in the same world. You see some characters in Guardians that were from Thor and vice versa.
Right. Well, it's just like the comics. You get excited when you see familiar characters. And I know that some reviewers really criticize the Marvel films for doing this, for having callbacks and expecting audiences to remember things that have happened and to have seen previous Marvel films. And I don't think they're getting the point. The point is that, yes, they do expect you to see these films, because they're making these films for people that are fans of their cinematic universe. And I
even
get,
if you haven't, though, even
you
if you
still can
haven't
appreciate
seen them,
the films.
Right. Like I didn't know, like the thing I just referenced about Thor characters being in Guardians of the Galaxy. I didn't even realize that until way after I saw the movie, because I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's the whole like that's the way that the comic medium works, is that you have characters that interact with each other, and that's part of the fun. You know, when they had the Spider-Man trailer and you see Tony Stark with Spider-Man, you see Iron Man and Spider-Man for like half a second, you're just like, holy shit. Like it makes perfect sense. But I gotta try and wrap up my thoughts, because I could keep going on forever about this. Finally, I think that they've shown, especially after Kevin Feige took over and the creative committee was dissolved, they're showing that they're taking more risks, at least in terms of what characters they're going to use, like Guardians of the Galaxy. And I mean, I want to talk about it because it's a big deal. Black Panther having his own solo movie, and now they're talking about a Captain Marvel movie, which, like, under Ike Perlmutter, he kept shooting down the idea of a solo Black Widow film because he didn't think that girl dolls would sell enough or some stupid shit like that. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to be like Marvel. Serious? I don't want to be like Marvel is like all about diversity, because that's a term that gets thrown around way too much. However, I do think it's a great thing. Like, when you look at the cast of Black Panther, it is stacked, dude. They have like Ryan Coogler, who did Creed. Okay, they have a whole bunch of people that are like high caliber actors, and they're introducing a whole nother world and a whole nother region, and they're doing it. You get what I'm saying? I don't want to like. I don't know.
No, yeah, I get. I think they're trying they're trying to expand the universe. Yeah, they keep expanding the universe while keeping it cohesive.
Right,
and that's a difficult balance to find, and I think it brings us to a larger point about franchises and expanded universes.
Sure.
Now, I've been telling Lark that I have, a very strong opinion on expanded universes, but simply, I would want every single thing I like in any genre, in any movie, video game, anything, to have an expanded universe. Literally everything. Every single thing I like to have an expanded universe. Even fucking like I was trying to think in my head an example like where it wouldn't make sense for me to want an expanded universe. Like I would just think of a random movie I liked, a Gone Girl, for example. That wouldn't make any sense. And I thought, you know what? If I saw another movie by the same people and a character from Gone Girl showed up in that new movie, I would be happy. So yes, literally every single thing I like, I want it to have an expanded universe. Now, when I say that, the obvious problem with what I'm saying is that could easily be done wrong. You could have too much of what you like, too much of a good thing. And yes, you're right. But I'm thinking of, in an ideal world, I'm just thinking really ideally what I would like. And really ideally what I would like is to see those sorts of expanded universes done well and done right. Like, latest, and this is spoiler territories, very vague, but still spoiler territories for the latest M. Night Shyamalan movie. Mm-hmm. I know nobody would care, but apparently he's back because apparently people are liking his latest 2 movies. Split, and again, spoilers, skip like 30 seconds from now if you don't want to hear this, but Split, apparently from what I've heard, one of the big twists is that it takes place in the same universe as one of Shyamalan's earlier well-liked films. I'm not going to say which one. On the first try, what the fuck? But that's what I've heard, and
interesting.
That's the kind of shit I'm talking about, where I want everything to be an expanded universe. Like, not everything just being like, they just throw more of the same thing in your face, because I think that's how you do an expanded universe.
So you want a Grown Ups 3 is what you're saying.
I do not want a grown-up story.
You just said everything should have an expanded universe.
I
am playing the devil's advocate.
Everything I like should have an expanded universe. And I think that for a lot of reasons. And when I say, when people people are going to criticize my opinion on that, and you should, because it's fucking ridiculous what I'm saying. But when I say that, I don't mean show me like the same thing. I don't mean show me like make like 7 Star Wars movies a year. I'm not talking about quantity. I'm not talking about similarity. I'm saying, you know, throw me a Rogue One every now and again. Throw me, you know, a totally different genre taking place in the same universe. You know, mix it up, expand this, because I'm interested in the worlds in which movies and video games and novels take place. Mm-hmm. It's one of my biggest interests on my YouTube channel is world building, and the world surrounding the media that we love. And I feel like, especially in video games, we don't see enough good spin-offs. Like, I'll give one example of what made me come to this conclusion. WildStar.
Okay.
A just above mediocre MMO, which had so many problems at launch that it's definitely going to be shut down eventually. It was supposed to be one of those WoW killer MMOs. Yeah, right.
Everyone that says that is never a WoW killer.
The world surrounding WildStar is so fucking cool to me. It is so much better than the game itself. I sometimes come back to WildStar just because of that. And the game isn't bad. In fact, the game is decent now. But like I said, there are way too many problems when it first launched. It's never going to catch on. But it makes me sad knowing, and I do know this, that once that MMO dies, that IP will be dead. We will never see anything else from WildStar from now until the end of time. Okay. There will never be WildStar comic books. There will never be a WildStar cartoon. There will never be a single-player open-world RPG. That's the kind of shit that makes me sad. That's the kind of shit that makes me want more expanded universes and more spin-offs, good spin-offs of series that we know of.
Sure.
And that's kind of what my point is, why I say I really do like everything I like. And one more thing before I move on and pass the baton to you, but this all rests on the quality of the expanded universe. And I talked about this in one of my earlier videos. I talked about how difficult of a balancing act it is to either continue an expanded universe or, you know, reboot or revitalize a series or just keep going with something that wasn't going to keep going from the get-go. Like Star Wars, like Star Wars 7. I talked a lot about how, you know, I see the problems people have with it just being a rehash of A New Hope. But I also talk about how you need a balance between staying true to what that series is about, but not letting it stagnate. Mm-hmm. That's a problem a lot of expanded universes have, and a lot of sequels have. They just do the same thing twice. Now, the reason why I don't criticize Star Wars 7 for that too much is because, you know, I got the sense they were more trying to ease us into this new phase, because they so easily could have done something completely different and pissed everybody off. Like, imagine if Rogue One was the first thing that came out before The Force Awakens. That is way different from any mainline Star Wars movie we've seen before. Mm-hmm. People would have been pissed.
True. Yeah.
So there's this delicate balancing act you need when you have an expanded universe or you're trying to revitalize or reboot or revamp a franchise. There's this very difficult balancing act that a lot of people don't get. It's a balancing act I don't think DC has.
I was going to jump right in
Marvel has. And it's a balancing act that I hope to see in future Star Wars films.
Speaking of DC not being able to balance that, I have figured out why I don't like the DC films, and it's very simple. They are a cinematic superhero universe without heroes. Like, think about it, okay? They took, and this is spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen Batman vs. Superman. When that movie came out, I saw it. I had very conflicted emotions, but my score went from a 6 out of 10 to 4 out of 10. I'm not going to get into the specific details of what I didn't like about that film. I had a film review up for it, but I guess it's gone now because I deleted my personal website. Anyways, point being, what do I mean by that? Batman. Batman is such an iconic superhero, right? What's his one fucking rule?
In most universes, he doesn't kill people.
He does in some, He did kill the Joker and Dark Knight
he also doesn't use
Returns.
guns.
Yeah, and he doesn't use guns, which he did both of those in Batman versus Superman. And I at first was like, okay, this is a more, realistic version of Batman. He can't possibly never kill anyone. Okay, fine. You can point out that in Batman Begins, he kills, Ra's al Ghul or lets him die, okay? And in The Dark Knight, he kills Harvey Dent, but not intentionally. He's trying to stop him from shooting someone else, okay? But then you watch Batman vs. Superman, and he's driving his Batmobile and launching fucking missiles at cars. And you're like, So now he's just a vigilante that kills.
And if they were self-aware of that, like a lot of people were trying to defend the movie by saying, by pointing to all this stuff that was hinted at in it, that like something drove Batman to be like this before that we haven't seen yet. And that would be fine if we had a sense that the writers knew what they were fucking doing and that was intentional.
But you've just taken your most beloved character and turned him into a vigilante. You've turned him into the Punisher. He's the Punisher then.
Right, and if they did that like way later in the series, for like a single movie, that would have been like, and the whole point was like, Batman, like you've gone too far. Like I know, like Robin died or something, but you need to move on and become who you really are. Like that would be one thing, but it goes back to exactly what they did to Superman. Spoiler territory. I'm not going to spoil this, but we know what plot point they go through for Superman in this movie, which is fucking ridiculous to do this early. The death of
Superman, yeah.
But let's just say, the death of Superman. It's ridiculous.
It's putting the cart before the horse. We don't have the buildup. This is our first introduction to a new cinematic universe Batman, and he's fucking killing people. And it's not that he's killing people. He's intentionally killing people. He didn't have to blow up those cars. I get, like, with a grenade, okay, fine. He doesn't want to kill himself, fine. He kicks it, someone else dies. But that is, like, you can't tell me he did not intentionally murder those dudes. And like you said, okay, fine. There's some, now that I think about it, there is some credibility to the belief that he went too far and they drove him crazy. But I'm like, you can't do that with your first introduction to your cinematic universe Batman. Because at that point, that is your Batman. You're putting the cart before the horse. I do not like that, right? He's not a hero at this point. And Superman, like you said, they rushed to do the death of Superman. So my point is, basically, DC doesn't understand their own fucking characters. There's no more clear evidence for this than Green Lantern. And that was going to be part of their cinematic universe until they just completely fucked it up. But they really, truly don't understand their own characters. I have not been on board with Henry Cavill's Superman from the beginning just because especially in Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel, I kind of got what they were going for. They just didn't execute it well. And Batman vs. Superman, he is a dick. He threatens people constantly. He threatened Batman, calling him vigilante, saying you're done, despite the fact that he killed someone else like minutes ago by pushing them through a rock wall. Like, he is not Superman. Like, he's just a superpowered person. That's my point. He's not a superhero. He's just a guy with superpowers. There's a huge difference.
How can you move on from this? How can we have
That's the
DC
point.
Cinematic Universe
when the core foundation is fucked? Like, they have a rocky foundation. They don't have a solid foundation. Their core foundation is a Batman that kills people and uses guns, and a Superman that really doesn't seem to give a shit about humanity. Both of those are terrible fucking interpretations for the character. Now, if they set them up well in the beginning and Batman wasn't killing people and Superman did give a shit about humanity, and then they went with the Injustice storyline, which that sees Superman kind of going rogue, it made sense. But you have that context of Superman wasn't always a dick and didn't just start out being a dick. You would have some context so that there would be character development and you would care. Or Batman, like you said, if they had done that later on and we see Robin die and then we see, Batman going rogue, we would care. However, if you start out right out of the gate with these two, in my opinion, inferior and badly represented characters, or badly represented versions of these characters that I fucking love, like, you're fucking with Batman, dude. I'm fired up now. You're fucking with Batman. Literally, like, my favorite comic book character. Literally one of my favorite, characters of all time. And you fucked them up. And I didn't say it when the movie came out because I was really trying to give him a pass. But I can't. Because I'm like, you fucked up the one character that has done you so well. You've created franchises from him. And you're like, oh, no, it's fine. And I mean, Ben Affleck did a fine job or whatever. Like, he was intense and all that stuff. And he was scary. But they took it too far. Which just goes back to my point of DC doesn't understand their characters, and that's why their fucking cinematic universe is doomed. I don't even want to get into the Joker and Suicide Squad, because essentially he's a fucking juggalo. He's a juggalo gangster.
Oh shit!
He's a juggalo gangster. That's all he is. He's a juggalo gangster. He doesn't make any fucking sense. There's no core to him whatsoever, and I can prove that with one scene. The scene with Harley Quinn when she's dancing on the tattoos man dick, and he's like, "Play like you want her," and then he fucking kills him for no fucking reason. Oh, because he's the Joker and he's crazy. No, the Joker isn't just crazy. The Joker has he does things because they're funny. And there's a comic where they pointed it out, and he was talking to somebody, just a random person, and the guy's like, "Are you gonna kill me?" And he's like, "No, why would I kill you? How would that be funny at all?" Like, what was funny about that? There was no point to that interaction. It's just DC, all flash, no substance. They don't understand their own fucking characters. I don't care what you say.
The Heath Ledger Joker was different from the
comics. Joker. He was, but he made sense for that film.
But he still had a core.
Yes.
Like that's a good point. Like he was killing people where it wasn't specifically funny, but he had a core that was
ideology that you could understand.
Yeah. He had an ideological core that was different from the original Joker. Still had hints of it.
Like,
but
this Joker is just a fucking gangster. He's not anything special. He's just a common criminal that dresses up. He's not particularly clever. He doesn't have anything that makes you think, okay, this guy's interesting. It's just like I said, it's a fucking juggalo gangster. Sorry, I'm throwing a lot of F-bombs out.
Open-minded. I fuck it. Who cares? This is the internet. I was open-minded about the Jared Leto Joker. I really was, because people hated the idea of Heath Ledger Joker before the movie came out,
and I gave him open mind too.
I felt the same way about Jared Leto Joker as I did about I'm blanking on the name, but Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor. I was like, okay, terrible. I'm willing to. I can see what both movies came out. I'm like, I can see what they're going for, especially for Jesse Eisenberg's Luthor. I'm like, if Superman was created today, I could totally see Lex Luthor being more like an evil Mark Zuckerberg, and I was all on board for that. But the execution was nothing like that.
Same thing with the Joker.
Similar thing for Jared Leto Joker. I'm like, okay, if the Joker were made today, I can totally see him kind of being like, bit younger, even though Jared Leto is old as fuck, but he looks really young. A bit younger, a bit more of like a self-aware kind of punk style thing, whatever. And if they can do it well in a self-aware, fun-loving way, then hell yeah, I'm up for this kind of Joker. But no.
So that's something.
Too much faith in you.
That's something that you have to get right. You have to build your base, and it has to be good. You can't keep making mediocre films. And I know people are going to be like, well, Marvel's got a lot of mediocre films. Okay, here's the point. Marvel might have formulaic films, and they might have predictable films, but they aren't mediocre because they get a lot of stuff right. The only thing people tend to focus on is what they don't get right. And that's fine. You're allowed to be vocal and to say, Marvel, do better. Push yourself. But they get a lot of things right. And the one thing that they get right that DC absolutely does not is the characters. I don't care what. I know this is an opinion, but I mean, to me, it's plain as day. They just don't know what to do with them. They don't know what to do with the Batman. I've heard that the script is a fucking mess. They're having to go back to the writing table for that. They wrote Suicide Squad script in 6 fucking weeks. I heard Wonder Woman is a mess. By the way, I've heard these pre-production things. And I've heard Justice League is a mess. Warner Brothers and you can go back. This is because it's Warner Brothers. You can go all the way back to Superman Lives, to the bullshit that was going on with John Peters and fucking Tim Burton and fucking Kevin Smith. Go listen to that story of what they wanted to do to Superman back in the 90s. Like, this is an ongoing problem for both DC and Warner Brothers because obviously they're partners. They just don't understand their characters. They don't know how to
I would have much rather have watched Nick Cage Superman.
It would be interesting.
And Batman versus Superman, because it was totally different. But I saw the documentary you're talking about. It was totally different and totally weird. But if you really put yourself in the headspace they were in when the Batman movies came out, which were also very different from what people were used to from Batman.
Sure.
So, I mean, like, yeah, it would have been totally wrong and weird and crazy. But, like, at least kind of like with Heath Ledger Joker in a different way, at least it would have had some sort of core
Right.
some sort of
You're right.
personality,
You're right.
something going on.
I meant more in terms of you look at their like creative decisions and who's making their creative decisions in Warner Brothers. And I'm talking about like the John Peters story where he wanted to put a spider in the third act and he wanted Superman not to fly and he didn't want to wear a cape because it's faggy. That's his quote, by the way. That's what he said. I don't want him wearing a cape because it's faggy. Which is just like, okay. So anyways, my point is that this is it's a historical problem with them, I think. And that's why I don't have much hope. Like, I gave them 3 fucking chances with Man of Steel, with Batman vs. Superman, and with Suicide Squad. I went to see all of those opening night, and every single time I was disappointed. So I'm just done. At this point, I'm like, wait until it comes out on Netflix or until I can get it, like, stream it for cheap. I'm not going to the theater to see their films. So I want to kind of move on because, like, the whole point is, like, we use the DC versus Marvel to show what a good cinematic universe looks like and what, in my opinion, in your opinion, a bad cinematic universe looks like. And then there's one final, like, risk that you have, and that's oversaturation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like my final point is just Star Wars. You know, the Star Wars cinematic universe is now unfolding, right? Disney has the rights. You know, I know a lot of fans are still not happy that Disney has the rights. And they're like, well, they're just going to ruin it. They're going to keep making films and they're going to milk this cash cow and blah, blah, blah. Get over it, dude. They are going to make more films. So what is it that you run the risk of? You know, and I've thought about this. Oversaturation is a real problem because it's like too much of a good thing is bad. So how do they avoid too much of a good thing is bad? Because, you know, those original films, nothing's going to ever diminish those. You know, even the prequels couldn't diminish my love for the original trilogy. Those films stand alone. If you only like those Star Wars films, great. That's fine. Just watch those films. You know, unless you, I mean, technically, though, George Lucas kind of did do a lot of editing. You could still find the originals, is what I'm saying. You can still find the theatrical cuts. Nothing's going to be able to ruin those except for George Lucas. But going forward, I think that they just have to follow Marvel's formula of doing, like, episodes 7, 8, and 9 will probably have that action-adventure tone. Rogue One already has a different tone, much like, you know, Thor is different from, you know, Avengers. Like, Avengers are the big blockbuster, you know, comic book movies, right? And then you have these solo, smaller films with different tones. If Star Wars does that, variety is the spice of life. It's the spice of a film franchise. They have a good base, obviously. We talked about that. You know, the original trilogy, even the prequels, there are interesting parts of the prequels that they could pull back from. You know, a lot of people think that Snoke is Darth Plagueis, which would be a cool, you know, way to tie back into the prequels. The person that trained, you know, Palpatine. I'm sorry if that's spoilers, but that's a prevailing theory right now. So they have the base. They have good characters. I'm sorry. I think Finn and Rey are good. I know a lot of people have problems with Rey, but I don't really care. I think they were interesting characters. Poe Dameron's a fucking man. Like, he is dashing as hell. So they have good characters. They have a good base. Sorry, I have a little crush on him. Also, Tom Hardy is reportedly possibly in episode 8. That's a full-blown man crush for Tom Hardy. He is my... Whoa. Yeah, he's... Anyways, my point is the saturation won't occur if they can keep it varied and if they can keep it interesting. And I do think there is that risk of trying to over-explain characters, much like... you could kind of see what Lucas was going for with the prequels, but to me, episode 1 never needed to happen. You don't need to see Anakin as a child. We don't need to see everything about a character. You know, for the Han Solo film, I'm hoping that it's just a heist movie with Han and Lando. I don't even really want him to meet Chewie in this film. I want those two to already be a thing, Han and Chewie. Like, I don't want an explanation for everything that's ever happened. Like, well, how did Han get his striped pants? And how did Han meet Chewie? And I could be okay with a few things, like how did Han win the Millennium Falcon? Because that's such a, you know, iconic thing. Yeah. And he won it in a gambling thing. And it would be fun to see that unfold. But I don't want everything necessarily over-explained. That's part of the oversaturation problem.
See, that goes back to what I've talked about before in terms of making an epic story. You can't explain everything immediately. No. And that's exactly what the original trilogy did right and what the prequels did wrong.
Yeah.
Because you can have a massive, crazy, ridiculous universe with a ton of shit going on. Like for example, the Elder Scrolls universe.
Okay.
I mean, I criticize the narratives. I'd say only Daggerfall and Morrowind really had good, like, narratives, but the lore and the backstory for that shit is fucking ridiculous. You have hermaphroditic demigods raping demons, for Christ's sake. You have like the universe built off of music and completely separate laws of physics, for Christ's sake. And that shit is awesome. But you don't need to know any of that to enjoy the basic simplicity of the narrative.
Right.
And what's right in front of you. Like, when you boil it all down for any of these expanded universes, regardless of what your world is doing, you need to have a simple story to tether on to. Like, again, going with the Elder Scrolls example, Morrowind is probably the most complicated video game story I've ever experienced in my entire life.
Okay.
It is bonkers, crazy, out the wazoo. But I mean, when you really boil it down, what the fuck is it about? A dude gets released from prison into a weird alien world and has to kill a god. That's the premise.
Right.
That's all you need.
Vivek, right?
It's pronounced Vivek, but I'm not talking. There's another.
Oh, is there another guy?
It's Dagoth Ur.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. I just knew you could.
But yeah, it's yeah, you can. But yeah, it's simplicity to tether you in and to wrap you in to this magical, crazy world. And I feel like that's what the prequels were missing. I feel like you need to pace out the exposition a lot because there is a lot going on in the Star Wars universe that's worth talking about. Is it worth talking about, the intricacies of tax policy in the Galactic Republic or midichlorians? Like, even the Star Wars universe has cleaned that up a little bit. Even they admit that was kind of a clusterfuck. They've made midichlorians a bit less offensive than they were originally, but
right.
But like, do you need that stuff within the narrative itself thoroughly explained? Hell no. Mm-hmm. Does it add something to the story to say that, this war started because of something very realistic or something like that? Yeah, sure. Like, all of that stuff is fine, but you need to pace yourself in what you're dumping on the audience, what you're trying to explain, and remember that above all else, you're trying to have fun in a weird, crazy world.
I felt like, if I can jump in real quick, I feel like that's where Warcraft fucked up. Because I enjoyed Warcraft, despite the fact a lot of people didn't, because I liked the world, obviously, and I played the game a little bit, but I still was like, this is cool. How often do we get to see, like, high fantasy movies? But they just dumped so much stuff into one movie. It's too hard to follow. Like you said, you got to pace yourself. I guess that's a final point. So, like, have a good base, have good characters, and pace yourself. That could be, like, the 3 points to a good cinematic universe. Because if you don't have likable characters, people don't care what happens to them. Even if the narratives are somewhat weak, you still get the excitement of seeing recurring characters that you like come into, subsequent films. Like a team up.
I want to leave on this one example, which I think sells our point really succinctly.
Sure.
A lot of us first were exposed to Lord of the Rings as kids, either with the books or the movies. I'm not the only one who had no fucking idea what was going on in the first movie. I'm not. But you know what kept me going? You know what made me not even realize I didn't know what the hell was going on as a kid? I gave a shit about Frodo. I gave a shit about Aragorn. I wanted to see them through this adventure. Everything else was just icing on the cake. There was a simple narrative. The big bad is over there. You need to take this MacGuffin, go toward the big bad, and destroy it in his own home. Right. That's the story of Lord of the Rings.
Simplicity.
A 5-year-old can understand that. Did I, or do I even now fully understand the massive mythos and the beautiful backstory and all the craziness that's happened in that world? Hell no. But to an extent, that adds to it because it feels real. You've made your world feel just as complicated and strange as real life can be. But you still tether me to this world with interesting characters I care about and a simple narrative. And that's, I guess, the message of this episode.
Yeah. And I just, as a wrap up, I want to say, we can kind of do like final thoughts here, but there's obviously like the reason that cinematic universes are becoming such a popular thing in Hollywood is because films they're not doing as well as they used to. There's a lot of competition in media. So if you can hook somebody on a cinematic universe, then they're more likely to return versus a film that's standalone, right? That's just basic That's just basic common sense, right? So you have like there's going to be a King Kong Godzilla cinematic universe, which I'm kind of excited for because I've always liked monster movies. There's going to be a Universal Horror Monsters universe, right? And then there's the emoji universe. Sony is reportedly about to sell their film and TV divisions, but they're waiting because they think that the Emoji Movie is going to be a big franchise for them. Think about that. Remember we were going back to like, you know, Japanese sensibilities and the kind of like that disconnect between what audiences want. And I know that sounds like mean, possibly prejudice, but I'm just saying, I'm quoting things that I've heard, I've read articles, and it's just part of their culture.
If that episode hasn't come out yet, we were talking about the Nintendo Switch, and we were trying to figure out what was going on within companies like Nintendo and Konami.
We're creating our own podcast universe of referring back to podcasts. So think about that. Sony thinks the Emoji Movie is going to be a big money earner for them. That's all I have to say. And not Ian McKellen, Sir Patrick Stewart is playing the shit emoji.
I was hoping that was just a rumor and not true. Jesus Christ. But I guess the moral of this episode is characters, narrative, and a cohesive universe, but also don't be Sony.
Don't be Sony. AKA. I always love doing those AKAs. That'll be our AKA title. Don't be Sony.
Or just don't be Warner Brothers, to be honest.
Yeah. There are a lot of ways you can screw up a cinematic universe. So anyways, as always, we like to get some feedback from you all, and this is the time to do it. I want to know what you all think. I'm sure that a lot of people like the DC universe. There are a lot of people that are invested in it, and that's fine. But
let us know why.
Yeah, why specifically do you like I've pointed out why I like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Why do you like particular cinematic universes? And do you think that there's there are some things to be said for films that are standalone? But it's interesting what you said, where and it's funny because it's your personality that you love the world building stuff. So to you, it's a great, everything could have its own expanded universe. And I think that at first I was like, what the hell is he talking about? But then I was like, no, there's a good point to it, where if you create something well, something that's really good, a lot of times people are creating their own little world. You know what I mean? And if it's an interesting world and you want to visit again, that's a sign that it's successful. So that's why you said, if it's something I like, I would love to see a world building for it, versus Grown Ups 3 or the Emoji Cinematic Universe. So again, thoughts, chime in, say something, call us names.
Call us as many names as you like, and we will see you next time.
Take care.